Good evening. I want to welcome everyone to the March 23rd, 2021 meeting of the Yarmouth Board of Selectmen. This is a remote participation meeting pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 orders suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the Governor's March 23rd, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Yarmouth Board of Selectmen is being conducted via remote participation. All votes during this meeting will need to be conducted by roll call. No in-person attendance will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access and participate in the proceedings as provided for in the order. Public participation will be permitted by allowing members of the public to join this meeting via Zoom or via the telephone, and comments can also be sent in by email to publiccomment@yarmouth.ma.us. I will now take a roll call vote to enter into the meeting quorum. All those in favor, say aye. Tracy Post.
Aye.
Mike Stone.
Aye.
Eric Tolley.
Aye.
Dan Horgan. Chair votes aye. Carries unanimously. Now I would like to ask folks to join the board in a pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the
Flag
flag
of the United States of America
and to
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Okay, the first item on our agenda tonight is public comments. Is there anyone seeking recognition? Kyle.
We have a Mr. Tom Sullivan.
Mr. Sullivan.
How are you?
Well, good evening.
Good evening. You can hear me pretty well.
Yes, we can.
Last night, I'm glad to hear the comment by Bob Lawton and Dan that I also was involved with that webinar from the town of Barnstable and the airport. As the former chairman of the Yarmouth Advisory Committee, I found it very interesting about what they said on a few items. I made some notes. I tried to get a question answered in regards to a noise study, the Part 150, and they would not commit to it. Whether or not they're going to do one down the road, I think the door could be open. The Part 150 noise study is done from the airport, requested by the airport to the FAA. So, and I know that the other item they did not discuss last night was the financials of the Barnstable Airport. They're losing money. They just come out recently with their assessment with the town, and you can see where they're actually losing money. So there's a big question on that. I had a question on their employments. They said they were up. I really have to question that. They also showed, well, they get into the environment a little bit, about the ponds, up at Gates Ponds. They're still polluted. They haven't touched them. They put in these water filtration systems in the stormwater runoff system. Okay, that was fine. They did that, but they did not replace the entire system. So the entire system, the pipes are still contaminated with lead. Okay. They did not discuss the groundwater pollution that runs by the terminal eastbound and has now got into the Maha wells. It's been in there for several years now. They've spent several $100,000 on water infiltration systems. And that's probably one of the reasons why we're pumping water over to them, because the Hyannis water is, some of it is pretty well contaminated that comes from that area. So I believe we're still paying, it's still paying us to pump water over there. So, and so the other thing that caught my eye and was really kind of was surprised to see, the noise contours that they showed. Those are the same noise contours, the 65 decibel contours from a study that was done in 1999. It's over 20 years ago. They did a small, supposedly update in 2008, but no one ever saw it. They were done by using Dan Wolf's planes, 402s. If there, isn't a conflict right there, but they were done with a 402, which is a propeller plane. They have not been done with turbines, and I did raise the question, and they gave me a little bit of an answer on that. In regards to turbines, now turbines are jet engines. The FAA grades them, as he explained a little bit last night. They go 1 through 5, 1 being the loudest, 5 being the quietest. Most planes today, especially the big ones, are 5s. I have to admit that they are 5s. But even if they're 3s or 4s, they're still going to be fairly loud. He mentioned something about that stage 2s have been phased out. Commercially, yeah, maybe. Privately, I don't think so. These are private jets. There is one that takes off here, and when it takes off west, my house rattles. I live by Bayberry. That's how loud it is. That's got to be a stage 1 jet. It is extremely loud. When the commercial airliner comes in during the summer, JetBlue, he's fairly loud because the term he's using, as you know, I have an Air Force background. And Bob, you're a pilot, so you know. It's called jacking the brakes. JetBlue has to jack his brakes and put his thrusters all the way up, so he can get his airspeed up faster for takeoff, because it is a short runway. And when he's doing that, those engines are full thrusters. They're loud. And if they go south, that would be towards Hyannis Center itself, Hyannis Road.
Tom, I hate to cut you off here, but you're
Yeah,
gonna have to wrap this up, okay?
Well, I've noticed you allowed other people over the last few weeks talk longer, so it is important that the people in Yarmouth know what's going on.
Yes.
When he turns south with this plane, he has to turn sharply north because the New York approach is in Cape Cod Bay. People don't realize it, but it's close, and they have to turn, and it's loud.
Okay.
The other one I question, and this is something that I'll finish up with this. Before George Lear passed away, matter of fact, it was a week before he passed away, he met with me, asked me to meet with him in regards to maps that he had drawn up for the town. These are the maps that clearly show the air restrictions over the town of Yarmouth, especially West Yarmouth. And I raised a question about that. The town of Barnstable has a restriction over our properties. And the Supreme Court ruled in 1962, that's a land take.
Mhm.
I want to know if and when the town of Barnstable is going to address this. It's overdue. Because if they put in 1533 as an ILS nighttime landing, that's the one they want to expand the runway,
Mhm.
they're going to take land. And those residents down there must justly be compensated. And it could cost hundreds of millions of dollars. They just had the same incident out in Westfield. With the F-15s out there, they took a lot of property, and they had to be compensated for it. Plus, there were homes on the outside insulated.
Okay,
So
Tom.
we need to have the committee back working so we can keep on abreast of this and keep you abreast, of course, what they're talking. All right, so that's it. I'll finish it up.
Thank you, Tom. Very much appreciated. Kyle, who's next seeking recognition?
Miss Vito Morris.
Ms. Morris.
Hello. As I mentioned to you at the last meeting, we now have a really serious problem, as far as I'm concerned, with the school budget and our assessment. So last night, I asked them if in view of what happened, whether they were still thinking of working on that budget to see if they can lower it to from what it is right now. And supposedly the subcommittee, the finance subcommittee, will be meeting to do just that. So that would be helpful. And it's interesting that Joe Glynn, in his report to the school committee as a liaison from the town of Yarmouth, mentioned that Ed Santio has already offered to help them if need be. And he sort of indicated that maybe even the Dennis's finance person would be willing to do that. So I'm hoping that unless the school committee has somebody that they can put in place right now to help them out, I hope that they will take them up on the offer to see if, what they can, what kind of help they can get from them. Now, there's another thing that happened last night at the school committee. They have they got their bid in and they approved the bid, and it's coming in at about $10 million below what was being budgeted. And several members of the school committee got positively giddy. They said, if absolutely, now we can put back everything that was taken out. Would you please keep an eye on that kind of thing? Because as a matter of fact, is there a representative from the board on the building subcommittee right now? Hello?
I don't believe so.
Oh, good. That's exactly what we need. We don't even have a I mean, don't you think it's important if they're going to squander $10 million savings on things that were taken out, but that obviously were not particularly necessary, and that we don't even have a member there from the board to speak up and let them know where we stand on something like that? Don't you think you maybe need to put someone on there immediately? I would hope so. I mean, this, I really can't believe it. I can't, well, anyway, that's it. Bye.
Thank you. Kyle, is there anybody else seeking recognition?
Mr. Tom Nicanello.
Mr. Nicanello?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, Select Board. Thank you very much, Tom Nicanello, Precinct 3. I see you have a very interesting agenda tonight with some wonderful topics to discuss, and I'm sure you're going to have some great solutions and decisions in setting up our community into the 31st century. So just speaking as a quick water lover, the DHY is on your agenda tonight. And just to point out that, you know, the gallons of water that's going to be dumped on the Bass River Golf Course is extremely excessive. And as you know, going into our budget, we're looking for revenue streams. And as you know, the user of the wastewater will be providing some funding, which is actually going to fund the whole system with over 40 years. And so we want to just for your consideration, you know, we could scale back the Bass River Golf Course and have a pipe go down 28 that would produce recycled water back to the user, which then could be a revenue generator for many, many years to come and help pay for the system. So if we're depositing 730 million gallons of water at the Bass River Golf Course and we cut that in half, that'll be about $400+ million if you charge a dollar per gallon to come back to the household. So it's a pretty good enhancement for getting the project paid for and to have a significant generator in the future. And so just for your consideration, when you think about your proposals tonight, that we're a green community, and just to dump 730 million gallons of water a year without being thoughtful of how we use our water is not, I think, our community's way of how we treat that. And second, Mr. Chairman, you know, being involved with the Chamber of Commerce for many years, we welcome the agenda item you have tonight in your packet about the Board of Health. They're looking for another inspector. As you know, these inspectors go out and they represent our town. And like the Chamber of Commerce, we want our residents and guests to have the best experience as possible. Right now, we have a housing inspector that's trying to do over 3,500 home inspections a year. If that's the case and you do the numbers, that's about 250 days of work. That's about 13, 14 visits a day. And I really don't see how that could happen. I think this is extremely important that the Board of Health gets this other agent. As you know, they've done a tremendous job over the last 12 months. And in 2008, our town hall has still not recovered from the setbacks that were, you know, put in front of us financially wise. So I would endorse the Board of Health agent. And just to say that the Board of Health and the has been doing an exceptional job with their, trying to end cigarette smoking in that town. They had a bylaw back in 2015 with cigarette caps, and we have a couple of landlords, commercial tenants that have a hardship case because of the cigarette cap. They are now willing to modify and move this bylaw into the next phase, so we can have our hardship reduced, and we can get some commercial business, which would increase the looks and also increase the commercial tax rate. As you know, as we were all kids, our commercial tax rate was about 17, 18, and right now it's 5%. And if you drive up and down 28, you can see why it's 5%. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have a good night, and looking forward to all the wonderful decisions you have ahead of you.
Thank you. Kyle, do we have anybody else seeking recognition?
Mr. Kurt Sears.
Mr. Kurt Sears.
Hi, just an answer to Vita's comment or question, I guess, is Eric is on the school building committee. So there is representation from the board there. And when Dan Knappich was here, he was also on the board, on that committee. So I'm sure some people have, their wish list, but I don't see where there's a lot of changes to what we originally anticipated to have for a project. So I know somebody's made a comment and I'm not in agreement with it. So there are people there watching out for our money. Thank you.
Thanks, Kurt.
No one else is seeking recognition at this time.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the COVID-19 update for the town of Yarmouth, and I'd like to recognize the Health Director, Bruce Murphy. Bruce. And the Chairman of the Board of Health. Okay, the floor is yours, Bruce.
Thank you, Board of Selectmen. Bruce Murphy, Director of Health, Town of Yarmouth. I have Hillard Bosky, the Chairman of the Board of Health, also present with me tonight. The next slide, Kyle. I'm starting off this presentation this week with just showing you where we are on what I'm saying the third wave is right now. As you can see from at the beginning in March and April when the pandemic first started, we kind of had a rise of the cases up to 40 active cases during the day. Slowed down during the summer. We went a number of days in the summer without any cases, down to only 2 or 3 cases. And then we see it spike up in November, then after Thanksgiving and Christmas. You can see this line is 40 cases. This line is 110 cases. And we had reached up to over 170 cases active a day. And then we start coming down in January right to February. And we thought we were back in the yellow communities for, I want to say 5 or 6 weeks. And then all of a sudden we noticed a little increase coming up. And then in March 8th, it just took off again. We just see it starting to shoot right up. The cases coming in since March 8th until yesterday, we had 148 new cases. And on 6 of the days, we were averaging double-digit positive cases coming in. So you can see what I'm saying is right now, I don't believe it's an uptick. I'm saying it's the start of the third wave that we're seeing is, we're back up to monitoring 110 active cases within the community, and that's community spread that I'll be going into. Where's this coming from? I think it's coming from, we have a new P1 variant that was found in the county. That spreads a lot quicker, and I think you're seeing that. I think you're seeing people not taking some of the precautions they need to take. They're getting lax. We know there's, people are getting COVID tired, and I think that relaxation is leading to the increase. And that's something that we'll discuss later as we go forward. Thank you, Kyle. Again, our COVID cases right now, we're active at 112 today that we're following. that kind of fluctuates. It's a moving number during the day. We'll add a couple and we'll take off a couple. So, but that's where we sit right now. And that's, as you saw from the previous chart, that's as high as we've been in a while. Thank you. The community spread, West Yarmouth, South Yarmouth, fairly close together. Yarmouthport, based on population, a little less, but we're still saying it's community spread. The question that had come up before is we are seeing some cases in the school, but right now it's mainly throughout the community, and I'll get back to the school in a minute. Thank you. The total number of cases, as we've seen come in the last 2 Fridays until today, to keep the numbers up. You can see the age group. The biggest age group right now is the 50 to 59 with 206 cases. The next 2 high groups are in that are very close together. Between the 20 and 39 are the next highest age groups that we have with positive cases. And, again, this is a main part of our workforce in town, and also families that have children in school. So when I say community spread, we're seeing it across all the villages. The schools are not seeing the uptick within each individual classroom. If we had an outbreak in school, we would probably have 2 or 3 cases within a classroom. Right now is what we're seeing is 1 student in the classroom that will knock out the other students that are too close. So that 1 student is probably picking it up from the family at home, not taking precautions, coming to school. We've had kids come to school when they're not feeling well or when they're waiting for a test. Sitting too close together knocks out a classroom, or going out on the recess for the younger grades where they're all playing together. And even though the teachers are trying to keep them apart as much as they can, knocks out a classroom, knocks out teachers. So that's a concern. And then even the next 2 age groups after that, 40 to 49 and 60 to 69, the cases are very close together. So I just want to be clear on that, that's where we're seeing the age group breakdown. Thank you, that's fine. The news flash from last week that came out, this is from WBZ News. The new COVID P1 that was found on the Cape in Barnstable County. And that's something that we're working on, surveillance testing now, working with the state. I had worked with them last year, along with last week, along with the town of Barnstable, to get an emergency testing site, which we're able to do Sunday at the Melody tent. We had 215 cars go through, 39 were people were positive, and for an 18% positivity rate. We have not received the information back on what the breakdown between Barnstable or Yarmouth is, or what the age breakdown. The surveillance state is still working on that, and how many P1 variant testing that they've done. We're still waiting for that information. So state's still doing variants and testing over there. And of course, I'm still saying we need vaccine to get out to the community. Thank you. Hospitalizations have done an uptick, as we can see from this week, Monday. The beds within Cape Cod Hospital have increased. ICU has stayed about the same, but overall between Cape Cod and Falmouth Hospital, there has been an increase. And I think we'll probably see that as the cases continue to rise. Thank you. Death amount of deaths remain the same at 31, with the age range 63 through 99 and an average age of 85. I think in the newspaper today, Cape Cod Times, they had a story about all the deaths within the Cape, and that was very moving for anybody that I'm sure looked at it and probably knew people that were there. So it's a serious COVID that people need to take precautions. Thank you. Just breaking down that 31 COVID deaths by age group, the yellow being the highest, 90 through 99. And then we go down to green where we had 13, and then three at both 70 through 79 and 60 through 69. Thank you. And then by gender, fairly well split between male and female on the 31 deaths. Thank you. We're still seeing long haulers. We're seeing information in the mail, in the newspapers, people that get COVID. It's not just like the flu and you snap out of it in 3 or 4 days. There is a percent that has ongoing symptoms for a while. They just don't, as soon as they might get released from having COVID, but they're still having the symptoms for a period of time. And I think when you talk to different people about COVID in the community or around, that you notice a lot of people are carrying symptoms for a period of time. Thank you. Precautions, I'm going to say this again. I know I say it every week. It just doesn't seem to be getting the message out in the community about gatherings. We're still hearing about gatherings and dinner parties and sleepovers and birthday parties. We can't stress it enough that this is part of this third wave, is not taking the enough proper precautions. Again, if you're not feeling well, don't go to work. Don't send your kid to school. Wait for your test results. Don't wait in the meantime. We need to all do this to stop the spread. And we all need to stay vigilant on this. Thank you. Points of discussion for future meetings. We talked about last year, and just things that we need to think about going in over the next few weeks. What we have to look at is the recreational use of rentals at the Bass Hole Cabana, Flax Pond. I know there's going to be no rentals at the Cabana through Memorial through Labor Day. However, requests are coming in now for weddings and large get-togethers. And now's not the time during a third wave that we should have people renting that. So that's something that we need to discuss. Landfill stickers are due April 1st. Last year, there was a pause because there was so many people, trying to get in and rush to get them. It seems to be doing okay. They've had some big days at the where they sell them at the Chamber of Commerce. But they've had some busy days in there. I know last year we had a trailer for possible sales. It's all about customer service. I know there's an idea of maybe putting it in a drop box and we could get back to people. So that's just an area just to keep an eye on for our customer service. Beach parking lots last year. I know we're a long ways from discussing the beach, but last year they did a great job between DPW and Rec that if it looked like it was getting way too crowded on the beach from either cars coming in and walk-ins coming in, and some of our beaches on the south side at high tide, we hardly have a beach, is controlling the parking lots. That DPW and Rec did a great job last year, and just something to think about. Homer's Park and Route 6A Park, the basketball, the playgrounds, we need to watch. I drove by Sunday. It's a beautiful day out there. There's probably 20 or 30 kids playing basketball, only 1 or 2 with a mask on. People in the soccer field, a couple families in the soccer field playing soccer had masks on, which was terrific. And then the playground was probably maybe been 50-50 with kids and parents. So something that we want to have the people outside. We want to encourage them to be outside now. I think that's important, but they need to take safety precautions. We do have signs posted, but I think people are just going by the signs. It might be something that I know when we get too many people who have reached out to the police department, and they would send a cruiser by if there's too many people just gathering at a site. But it might be something that, and you did hear from Recreation, they do have a person to go around and check the cabanas and things and sites during the summer, but not regular. We might need a COVID intern checker just to go out and do public education during the summer. Might be something we might have to work into the budget. The Board of Health last night did talk to regarding town facilities open, and had the Amy Howell from Recreation come in. She did a great job presenting her what she's looking at is a soft reopening at the rec building that they work with in the chamber. And she wanted to have people be able to come in because not everybody could get online to register, some of the grandparents and so forth. And people wanted to come in and fill out forms and discuss scholarships and payments. So we looked like a great plan she submitted. So that's something the Board of Health approved to go forward. And I believe probably the next step is, I think it probably goes to you for a final endorsement. So the Board of Health will be looking at a few plans from departments as they come forward. Thank you. Vaccine, I'm going to kind of go through quick on this, not quick, but as people know, the governor has now gone into the next group of eligibility starting yesterday. So now the age group 60 and over, and then 55 and older come in April. So we're into that right now. The next slide will show some of the people that are also within the 68 group that are open now is the restaurant and CAF workers. I think that's great to get the restaurant people, the cooks, the servers, the managers, cashiers, vaccinated, be eligible for vaccination. Grocery and convenience stores workers, the cash, the beggars, maintenance and security staff in the stores. I think that's terrific. We go down to transportation, taxis, Ubers, transportation, subways, their workers are eligible. Then we go down to public works, wastewater, utility workers, water supply workers, DPW workers, sanitation workers. So court officers, defense attorneys, and within that court system. So we're going to have a lot more people eligible right now for a vaccine. So that's just more people trying to get online to get a vaccine, competing with the elderly. So, and we know how difficult it is to get online to try to get a vaccine, no matter how quick it can be. Sometimes it can take hours, and that's difficult for the seniors. Hopefully vaccines on the way. Just next slide, our population right here. We still have quite a few people that still need vaccine. We're getting out there. A number of 75 and older that have at least had one shot has come down from what we can see is probably about 600 there. But if you look at the age 65 to 75 plus, we still have a couple 2,000 people that still need to get vaccination. So it sounds like we're making good progress, which we are. But when you look overall, there's 2,000 people. And if you go back to age 50 to people 75 and older, we're almost up to around 6,000 people in town still trying to get their first shot. So you combine those people with the new people that just got on, there's a competition and to get on for the shots, to try to get on the community college or the local pharmacy. So hopefully vaccine, they say, is coming, but we'll see how that goes. Thank you. Again, vaccination plans stays the same. We work with at the community college. Vaccines probably up to about 1,100 doses at that site. Hopefully later in March, when they do get additional doses, they'll go out to other regional sites. Thank you. Homebound contacts, they are still very much in our mind. We're still reaching out to them. The Council on Aging has reached out to them on the list they're keeping. The Meals on Wheels, we've sent a couple letters home through them to make sure they contact their Council on Aging, and I've contacted the local churches to pick up a few other shut-ins and homebound. The churches feel very glad that we've reached out to them, and they feel very much part of the community. Thank you. Vaccination plan is obviously dependent on the vaccine. Hopefully we're hearing Johnson & Johnson will be here more in the first of in April and more of an age group that will help. We're working now with community health, care in Hyannis. They've been doing second shots the last 2 weeks, but we hope to get there next week when they get us in, and we can hope to maybe get 40 or 50 people. And we did rent a bus one of the times we went there for people that couldn't drive or had some mobility issues. So we'll reach out to that category again, that Diane's keeping up at the senior center. And we still work with the VNA and the last mile on possible future vaccinations. Okay. Vaccination team, again, Harbor Community Health in Hyannis, Outer Cape Community Health, we're working with right now, and they will be our contact for the homebound people. We're also working with the county and the VNA. Reaching out to the, we're still reaching out to the homebound people to let them know we are still planning for them, and that we understand. So even though more people are being allowed to get the vaccine now, that we have them in mind. We'll be working with Outer Cape Community Health, and we're hoping to start our homebound with vaccine the first week of April. So we have called them twice, Diane and the staff up there, to keep the people comfortable that they know the town's looking for them, out after them. Thank you. The vaccination team is the health department, Diane and her group up at the Council on Aging, police department. Fire departments also had more people, paramedics certified to give vaccine, so they'll be part of that homebound vaccination team. Thank you. Council on Aging number, appointing anybody watching, call, they'll get placed on the list if they haven't been picked up at homebound or need assistance. They can also, if they're having trouble even getting on a regular line to get on, if they're having difficulty, can't get on through the county line, call, and we're still passing names along to Cape Cod Healthcare. So Diane has already passed 4,000 names on that she had a list from the Council on Aging from her email blast that she's sent out 2 or 3 times. So as new names come in, we forwarded them and she forwards them to Cape Cod Healthcare. New registration from the site, I believe they're coming out with another new one. Keep our fingers crossed trying to get on, but the best you can do is just try to get on and take your time, and hopefully you have a little time. Thank you. County vaccination helpline is still manned during the day. You get to talk to a live person, and they'll try to guide you on assistance and explain pretty much what I'm explaining is it takes time to get on these large vaccination sites. And I know a lot of people are waiting for the Cape site because they don't want to have to drive to Gillette or the Heinz Center. So you do have somebody to talk to there besides the Council on Aging. Thank you. We had, this is from the Melody Tent Sunday night, our emergency vaccination site that I had mentioned that we'd done the 215 cars. This was Channel 7 News that had learned about it, had called me during the day, and I said I'd be out at the site. Several of the news agencies have picked up the P1 variant on the Cape, along with the increase that we've seen, possibly the 3rd wave, and they want to know where it's coming from, what's the Cape doing, and what are we doing to keep our residents safe. Again, we're asking for testing, which they're doing here. But my main response back to Channel 7 to bring back is we need vaccine for the people along with the homebound. Thank you. Today, Channel Fox News came down 25. I was following up on the story again, noticing the uptick in the wave coming on the Cape, and in particular some of the cases in Yarmouth. And again, I was explaining to them the numbers that have come up and the need for vaccination of our emergency vaccination sites that we would like, along with more vaccines that we can get sooner for our homebound. So I have a couple shots on that. So that's running tonight. People can still get home, and it's on the 7 and 10 o'clock. It's the lead story on Fox. It's the first story. And I'm pointing out here, as I was pointing out the chart showing the increase in positive cases. Bill Shields also called from Channel 4 today, following up on the story. Again, same response. They had heard a case, and I said we need vaccine. And this is the chart that I had showed you at the beginning, and I'm going to end with now, of the increase in cases just within Yarmouth. And that's how I end. Questions?
Board members, questions? I'm going to start with Tracy Post. Tracy,
Questions, thank you.
Eric, do you have any questions?
I don't, thank you.
Okay. How about Mike? Mike Stone?
Thank you. This is a disconcerting report. I think you remember last week when we were talking about this, I was commenting that we were seeing some unusually high numbers of daily reports that were concerning, as many as 15 in a day. And I remarked that that was more really on a daily basis than a lot of the reports we got when we had these two previous spikes. And about 2 days later, that's when the state reclassified us and put us in the red zone. So, you know, looking at the graph, it's obvious to me that this is more than an uptick. And I agree, it looks like a major third wave, if you will, of the virus. In terms of the emergency testing, and I asked this question of both yourself and, and Dr. Bosky, he has pointed out to us before that we shouldn't concentrate on the, just the number of cases, but what's more meaningful is to focus on the rate of infection. And with this new variant that appears to be more highly contagious, isn't it true that we don't really know how effective the J&J, the Pfizer, and the Moderna vaccines are going to be against that new variant? I've read reports that are articles, I should say, that talk about maybe 40% effectiveness is in maybe up until in the 70s. So do you have any information on that?
Mr. Chairman, would you?
Yeah, we certainly don't have any final word on how effective these vaccines will be on variant strains. Viruses mutate. It's very common, and then we have 3 here, in fact, in Massachusetts alone, and we really won't know for quite some time. In fact, we won't know how long these vaccines will be effective about the main coronavirus that we're fighting. So it's not, it's not a reason to be hesitant about getting vaccinated, that's for sure. But its effectiveness, we don't really know how long we're going to maintain our antibodies. We take flu shots every year, and because viruses change. So it's the best I can tell you right now on that. As to the productivity rate.
I think that's a good point. It should be a word of caution, really, to people out there that they can't overly rely on a vaccination. There's a lot of people that think that once they get vaccinated, they're immune from being infected or transmitting COVID. There was an article in today's paper. I don't know if you saw it. And there's a doctor, I think his name's Dr. Roach from Harvard Medical School. People ask him questions and he gives written responses. One of the questions that was asked was whether people who are either asymptomatic carriers or people who had almost unnoticeable symptoms, whether those people, notwithstanding the fact that they have been vaccinated, could transmit COVID. And the answer was, we don't know. It's possible that they could.
That's absolutely correct. If you think it's difficult to get people to wear masks now, you can imagine what's going to happen when people are vaccinated and get them to wear masks. People need to remember, just because you get vaccinated doesn't mean you're not going to become infected. You may not feel sick, but you could certainly transmit the virus elsewhere to another individual. And the positivity rate.
I don't think a lot of people understand that, really.
Yeah, we've tried. It's been a year now. We've been trying since we were first in front of you, stressing just that point. You make the point about the positivity rate. Right now, the state is below 2. It's below 2%, and we are near 6% and rising. So right now we're falling behind, and I'm sure everyone in town is worried. We have the tourism season coming up. our businesses have another season coming up, and we're just praying that they make it. We just need to get the rate lower. And
I think
this is
Barnstable
gonna
is close
become,
to 8%.
it's going to become more difficult in that the governor is, reducing restrictions, which may be on target. It's great for the rest of the state, but that may not apply, and I don't think it does, to what we have here on the Cape. I need to remind people who are listening, our rate is second highest in the entire state. That's the positivity rate for the COVID testing.
You have any opinions as to why that may be, that it's us and we're at the top of that totem pole?
I wish I did. We haven't heard from Boston yet what they think. When the testing comes back, it may be helpful. Certainly genetic sequencing will help us that way as well. There could be a focus of a particular location or a group of people. We just don't know yet why it's spreading this quickly here.
Bruce, do we have any specific information on the schools as to what's happening there infection wise?
Yes, we do. I'm in contact, or we're along with the office almost daily, 7 days a week, with the school, the lead nurse, Kristen Dwyer. We have a Zoom conference with the superintendent once a week. We are seeing an increase of students, positive students in the school coming into the school. More positive students in the school than we've had at any point in time during this pandemic. This last third wave, we've seen more in the school. Again, knocking out a classroom. We watch that and call the parents. Especially if it's on a weekend, we see it come in, or a parent will call us so we can let the family know not to send their child into school. We've picked up a few students that are homeschooled, home learning, remote, that have been positive also. So it's not that if you don't go to school, you're not going to get it. The people at home, we're still seeing cases from that. Right now, I believe we have in the district, I believe we have 9 classrooms closed. And it's tough when you close a classroom, because especially in the younger age group, they have to have a parent home. And they were getting food, in their meals at school also. So it's kind of a trickle effect.
What
Bruce,
does it take to close a classroom? If there's just one COVID case, does that require the classroom to be shut down?
Well, they're close contacts, and in the younger grades, when we've I noticed they go out on the playground and all the kids are playing together and they're not staying 6 feet apart. The high school, usually we've been able to keep the classroom open, but the younger grades, probably from 5 and lower, it's been, the whole class would have to get because of close contacts. The school is looking at, they may be doing some additional testing. They've reached out to DESE, and they've reached out to the Department of Public Health. So that's under discussion actively right now, along with us and Barnstable. But also, besides knocking out the classroom, it's knocked out some teachers that are close on the some of the special needs classes, some of the younger classes where the teachers still walk around and try to help the person. And I want to say we probably have about 15 teachers out right now.
Mark, can I read just a point, Mike, on that?
Sure.
I can offer a little bit of information from the school district that was put out today.
Sure.
Yes.
The district's proud. This year, we've successfully navigated a very challenging time during the pandemic, with the exception of moving to full-time learning a few times around December. I'll go on, it goes on. However, in the last 2 weeks, there's been an increase in COVID cases on Cape Cod. We are also seeing more active cases in our school than we have seen previously. This is not at a level where we are seeing in-school spread or feel we need to move our entire district to full remote. Nevertheless, we believe that we should take some proactive steps to ensure we can continue in-person learning. One of these steps we will now take is to provide free COVID surveillance testing for all DY students, staff, and families to protect our school and community from in-school spread and/or asymptomatic spread. Students and staff can continue in school while they await results. Since the surveillance testing is no reason to quarantine. Free COVID testing will be available for all Dennis Yarmouth students, staff, and families on the following dates. Wednesday, March 24th at Mattakese Middle School in the gymnasium between 12 noon and 6 p.m. Friday, March 26th at the DY Regional High School Gymnasium from 12 noon to 6 p.m. And then again on Monday, March 29th at Dennis Yarmouth Regional High School Gymnasium from 12 to 6. Students who attend these schools and these locations may be tested while at school with a signed parent guardian consent form. Otherwise, parents may take their child to either of these locations during the hours listed above to be tested. Family members are welcome to be tested too. Consent forms will be available on site if needed.
You know, I hope that a lot of the staff can get the vaccine, because you really don't know with 15 teachers out how many teachers are infecting students and how many students are infecting teachers. Everybody's assuming that the risk comes from the kids, and I'm not so sure that that isn't an oversimplification.
Thank you for reading that, Tracy. I know we were working on that with the superintendent. We weren't sure when that was going to come out. So
yeah, she mentioned it at her meeting last night, but she didn't have the details. So that was released today.
You know, I just make a point about how easily this virus is transmitted. Director Murphy, I put a slide up there, and it's shocking to see it each time. 31 people in town have died from COVID-19. This began from one person getting infected on the other side of the planet. And that's what we're up against. Just as a reminder, we all have this COVID fatigue and you really forget we're still in the middle of it.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because I was just thinking that this whole thing started with the report of one case in Sandwich. And now look at where we are today. And similarly, we have one case of this new strain, and God knows where that's going to lead when we look back several months from now.
I can tell you there's a variant in New York City now that's currently responsible for 40% of their cases. That's how quickly it spreads and changes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dan Horgan. Dan, do you have any questions, comments?
Very quickly, Bruce, I'm glad to hear the department heads are being proactive in terms of planning ahead for increased volume with parking and programming. Do you need Board of Selectmen approval to make those reductions, or are plans in place to make them as necessary?
Well, that's something I can talk to the town administrator on, and I think some of them are, we've looked at them. I'm not sure they all need to go back fully to the Board of Selectmen for some of the openings, but some of the other discussions, yes, it would be.
Depending on the numbers, can we be more conservative than the state? They seem to be expanding while we seem to be going at higher rates. How do
Yes.
you make the determination on that?
Well, I think that's when we're seeing this testing come back. And now we just see the Melody 10 testing come back as 18% positive. I think as we look at the surveillance from that in the schools and then maybe another testing site, I think that will be some of the determination that we'll use. But, we need to try to keep the people outside. It's fresh air. We want to make sure our restaurant people, everybody gets vaccinated. And that's why we need the vaccine down here, to get as much vaccine as we can. And, try to be as safe as we can to keep our workers safe also.
Speaking of that, I want to just thank you for putting yourself out there so much in the media. I know that that's not always comfortable, but you're doing it, and the publicity that it's generating, I think, will help us get more vaccines. Just one final question. When people are hospitalized, are they given a vaccine at that point if they haven't been vaccinated? And is it effective at that point?
That I'm not sure, Chairman Hilliard.
Yeah, I mean, last time I heard that they weren't automatically giving it in the hospital. I know people who've been out who have not felt well have been and were infected have felt better by getting vaccinated. That I do know. I don't know about the timing while they're in the hospital acutely.
At one time, the hospital did not have vaccine to give out themselves. So they do have some now. How they're dispensing it, I'm not quite sure on that.
Okay, thank you so much for all your work.
Yeah, and we are also reaching out in general to nursing homes because some of them are also having trouble getting second shots. And some of them are having trouble getting first shots because new people are moving into the nursing homes. So we are talking to nursing homes and trying to see if we can get that message out to DPH's additional vaccine and for that need.
Thank you for that.
Very good. Before we move on to the next item, is there any other follow-up question at all by any board member? Okay, well, I want to thank Dr. Bosky and Bruce Murphy for participating in this discussion. The next item on the agenda still is with the Board of Health. There's a new employee request. And as required under the charter, that request typically comes before the board for a discussion and eventually an approval. So I'm going to send it back to Bruce Murphy and Dr. Bosky for your presentation, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, very much, Mr. Chairman. Again, Bruce Murphy, Director of Health. We had discussed this twice. We've been before the Finance Committee. We made a presentation in general as part of our overall budget presentation to the Selectmen. We mentioned this position, and I just would like to mention it again for the board's consideration. For the number of housing rental units we have in town is really expanded from the late 70s when the regulation took effect. We're now up to probably 3,600 rentals. You have a spreadsheet before you on this. And we've picked up approximately 600 rentals over the last 2 years. And the new state short-term rentals, which the, thank you, Kyle, that the town received notice of, 400 of them were not registered with us. So there's a lot of non-registered rentals in town that do not register with us, or register then fall back off the grid that we keep, I say we keep chasing and monitoring them. So of the new money, the 400 times the $75, because it's between 70 if you do it online, or 80 if you come in to pay, it's going to be at least $30,000 of new money each year. Number of inspections, approximately 1,400. So we're not quite getting in half with one inspector. And again, we need to get in for safety, make sure the housing meets state housing code. Safety of our tenants, I think, is the reason that we need to get in there. We do have a lot of challenging landlords. We have a lot of challenging tenants. We have a lot of challenging tenant-landlord disputes that we spend time with. And then we're issuing permits. Complaints over about 900 last year. They include a site visit to confirm, was there a complaint, calls, letters to the landlord, back and forth, meetings. Even a simple trash complaint could take up to 3 or 4 hours. You're making the site, you're calling the landlord, you're making it pick up, you're back and forth. So that takes time. Money projected, if I'm looking at strictly the housing program, not our whole department, but what we bring in to date, from what we have a record of, it's gone up a little from 141 because we just did a turnover on Friday, that we're up to 153,000 that we've already brought in. We know it was lower last year in the pandemic, which I'm sure all the finances and down budgets were in. But from the year before, we can see we brought in 244,000. So that's the company in which the year before was 183,000. So we were trending up. We believe that we're going to be back into that 244,000. That's what we feel. I feel comfortable with that. We have large properties in town. We have some large complexes. We have some large landlords, and that brings in about $90,000 annually. The wages that we have right now is the current housing inspector is at 60,000. The new one we're looking at, step wage would be 55,000. we look at benefits for this one person. I know there's discussion is, do we need to figure benefits in for all housing staff? I know that's a question that probably needs to be discussed. We're looking for that person to go in. We're comfortable that, if you can move down a little bit, Kyle, we're comfortable that we can do that within the request coming in, based on our last 2 years of income just within the housing area. If for some reason that we are short, but I don't think we will, but say we are, there's a possibility of using a slight amount from the CARES funding. And I know there's state short-term rental money that's wants to be dedicated towards wastewater. I know you've had discussions on that, as how to finalize that. And wastewater is obviously important, but if a small percent need to be pulled out of that, you know, that would be a request that we would ask you to consider. We still have not received the second quarter from the state on the number of short-term rentals or how much that income will be to the town. Obviously, if there's more short-term rentals, that will help us with their renewal of permits. So based on that, we're trying to get more inspections to keep people safe in our housing rentals. We feel this is a reasonable request for your consideration.
Thank you, Bruce. Dr. Bosky, did you want to comment on this?
You know, it's a lot of numbers and I understand why, but just as a representative of the Board of Health, we're really talking about the safety of the tenants, of what goes on in these homes, and some of them really are in disrepair. Just to keep in mind, it's a health issue, is how we see it. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I send this around to the board members for some discussion and comments, I'd just like to ask the interim town administrator, Bob, if there's any recommendation or thoughts with respect to this request before we go much further. Do you have any comments, Bob?
We've been talking internally about the cost, and I guess one question is, do we want to have the inspection viewed separately from the overall Board of Health? If we do, there may be funds, although understand that this request would not become effective until FY22. That's what the bylaw says. Now, there may be some funding temporarily in FY21 through the CARES Act to assist. In addition to the Board of Health, the building department and the fire department are also involved in these inspections. I was told today that in one case, one person had to spend 6 hours on one property in the fire department, and the Board of Health has to spend similar hours. So is there a need? Most likely, yes. When can we fund it? I think when we have our finances in order, because we have some serious issues ahead of us for balancing the budget. But I would suggest that to go forward to the next step, finalize the income and how we're going to apportion those funds, and then get to the Finance Committee and have a discussion with them about where this particular item fits within the overall scheme.
Very good. Thank you, Bob. Okay, let me go around to the board members. I'm going to start off with Eric Tolley, Selectman Tolley. Do you have any questions or comments, Eric, on this request?
One question and one comment. So am I to understand that it is proposed that this new position be funded entirely out of short-term rental income?
That is our hope, and we could have done it in the preceding year of 2019. We had, when we brought in 244,000, that would have done it. The question is, do all new hires have to figure in that 40% benefit package?
Okay, thank you.
This is a question, I think, Mr. Chairman, I think, Bruce, what Mr. Tolley was asking was, you don't mean the short-term rental, you mean the rental income that you receive from the local charge, not from the tax. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So I understand the need, and I'm willing to fall on Bob's recommendation to see how the funding availability goes. But while I understand that this is a much different situation, I just want to remind the board that we recently denied a similar request from the Conservation Commission due to the, what is essentially our policy of a hiring freeze. So just want to make the board aware of that, remind them in case they had forgotten, but I'll wait and hear what others have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Mike Stone.
I don't have anything new. I would follow Bob's suggestion as well, which Eric seems to be in accord with that also. I think there's a need there. I think the question is, as Bob's pointed out, how do, are these revenues going to return, and how does it fit in with the overall financial picture of the department? And there's also the benefits question that has come up as well. That's a big add-on, obviously. So again, I follow Bob's recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Dan Horgan.
I tend to agree. I'm supportive of the interim's suggestion that we wait and see how the financing is solidified. I definitely think the need has been proven. I guess my one question would be, is it a possibility to perhaps approve a part-time position that gets us around the benefit package? Does that offer any relief to the inspector?
Okay, and we'll just, Bob, did you want to respond to that now, or did you want to?
I think the answer would be yes. I think anything they can do, each unit is not inspected each year either. So with some new technology and possibly, I think for this fiscal year, we might be able to do something with a part-time person using CARES Act funding, which is perfectly legitimate. And we could use that as a test. But we'll still go forward if the board seems to agree, go forward to the Finance Committee to start their more detailed review.
Thanks, Bob. Anything else, Dan?
No, thank you.
Tracy Post.
Thank you. What makes it eligible for the CARES? You said it can't fall under CARES under health, but potentially under building?
No, I'm sorry. It does fall under the CARES Act for health.
Have we considered contracting this service?
We certainly could do that. Mr. Murphy, I don't know if he has a comment on that, but certainly wouldn't have a problem with that.
No, I wouldn't have a problem with that. Whatever we can do to get a person in here or continue with the person that we have in here that's been helping us would be helpful. We started with an intern, a summer intern. We're able to carry that person on that is now familiar with the housing code, doing inspections, following and tracking. So we have a very experienced person that we would like to keep somehow or another. And if that's a way to do it, to see how we go over while we're looking at funding, we're obviously willing to do that.
Yeah, I think with the benefits, it's difficult. I know when we tried newer positions in the past, we had, it's always been my request to try to contract it first and see, how it goes in terms of expense versus income. And if it, plays itself out well, then after a period of time when we can see what the real long-term effect is on the housing numbers, then, instead of, I think we've got some assumptions with the numbers and whether or not it's going to be able to fund itself. I think if you could use the CARES funding and you may have to pay a little bit of a higher number for a contract, but we'd know what that number is. It wouldn't be the 40%, probably potentially long-term. And then, if we have budgetary issues, which we have now, we're not responsible for unemployment if it doesn't work out. I think it's extremely important that we make sure that these dwelling units of any sort that people are staying in are safe. I think we have a responsibility to do that, and I don't want to look back and wish we had inspected something that we didn't get to and have a travesty happen. So that would be my suggestion, is to look at contracting it.
We
Anything
can
else,
certainly
Tracy? Tracy, did you have anything else?
That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bob, did you want to comment?
I think we can easily do that sooner than later, and that would be a good test of how we're going to be able to proceed. Also, I should note that Mark Grills, the director of the Health Building Division, is on the line. I don't know if he wishes to say anything with the chairman's approval.
Say that again, Bob. I'm sorry, I was distracted.
Mark Grills is on the line, and he may want to weigh in on it, being in charge of the division.
Mr. Grills.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, how are you? My only point that I'd like to make is that I believe that the assistant housing inspector was included in the budget proposal as a part-timer. So I think that when we first started this process back in October, November, that position was there. And I'm not 100% certain that it's still there. I haven't seen the budget in a while. Bruce has a copy of it someplace. But the number of inspections that they're doing now, the housing inspector, Kevin, today spent 2 hours on a problem property with somebody who created illegal bedrooms in their basement that had no means of egress. And also that was 2 hours today with two of my inspectors from the building department. But this has been an ongoing thing for months. So we've been, they're from a different country, so there's a language barrier there. But while we're managing to make communication, but this is just one instance where we've had to write letters. There's a certain amount of time that we spend dealing with these things that aren't referenced in a permit. So if we have a permit for a project, that's one thing, but I've shown you the picture of my board, and there's just so many complaints that come in on a daily basis. And the amount of time that it takes to send letter, draft a letter, send the letter, follow up on the letter, and eventually some of them they do end up in court. I have 3 on the board right now that we're going through town council to get on the board. So I understand that there's no income related to us being in court, but it's one of the evil necessities of doing our job. We have to do our enforcement, and it's a matter of enforcing for the protection of the citizens of the town. So that's all that I'd really like to add. So I do appreciate you guys even putting this on the agenda and considering it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, I will bow out for now.
Thank you for your comments, Mark. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Obviously, this is again, the inspection departments are under a lot of pressure, and now with COVID, obviously, that just adds another dimension and layer of complication. I think I agree with the sentiment of my fellow board members, and I particularly want to highlight something Tracy said about the importance of protecting public health and staying on top of that. So I think the consensus from the board, from what I understand, is that this request, obviously, we're very supportive, but the details need to be worked out with the interim town administrator in consultation with the finance committee. And I think that's the direction it should head in now. And hopefully after you folks have had a time to look at it, Bob, and work on it some more, you can come back with a final recommendation for us. But it's my hope that CARES funding can be of some real help in this regard. Obviously, there's an additional fusion of federal dollars coming to Yarmouth as well, that hopefully that could be a potential source of funding. And it would seem to me reasonable that these pots of money be resourced to some degree to help underwrite these expenses. So
I think I will go with the contract. I think that makes a lot of sense. It gives us a couple of options. It lets us see how it works, see how the funding is, et cetera. We'll still go in a parallel track just to have the finance committee. And I will check to see if the part-time position, funded position, is in for FY22. I just don't recall. But I think Tracy Post's idea about the contract makes sense for now, and I'll work on that and get that done.
Great.
We have to remember these grant funds aren't going to be around forever, so we could utilize it in a
Yes.
period of time where we can look towards working in a future budget.
Mhm.
But
Nice to be able to go in, not full with both feet, to be able to go in on a sliding scale, so to speak.
No,
Okay, done.
appreciate
And I
that.
think we've met the criteria of the charter. So I think we're in good shape, at least legally. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Dr. Bosky. And we're going to move on. The next item on the agenda is the DHY update. And we have, I know, Jeff Colby standing by along with David Young. And I don't know if Kurt Sears is going to be able to join us. I know he was here earlier, but we're interested in getting updated on where things stand with respect to DHY. And just for background, there's been a lot of discussion about DHY, obviously. And I think all the towns involved in this initiative had been discussing bringing to their town meetings an agreement. And I know this board has expressed interest in getting more details, better cost information, particularly about some of the components of it. So I thought it would be appropriate to make sure that we get an update now in terms of where things stand cost-wise and overall in terms of the project before we head into town meeting. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Jeff, to kick things off. I see Kurt's there. Is David Young going to join us, or is that is he on standby in case we need him?
Well, I defer to Kyle if he's in the waiting room or not. I know he was meeting with the Dennis Board of Selectmen earlier this evening, so it is possible that went a little long. I'm prepared to cover the update. He was going to be here in case there's any detailed questions, technical questions about the wastewater plan generally, but I'm happy to move through this update and have that discussion. And maybe when he joins us, he could be elevated to the group then.
Okay. Floor is yours, Jeff. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. It's been a very active period with regards to DHY, a number of discussions. We had been meeting with the subgroup on a monthly basis, but recently we'd gone to more often than that as we needed to kind of prepare for some of our discussions and talk through some issues with the subgroup. They've been very productive and very beneficial meetings and understanding where our partner communities are. What I'm planning to do tonight, as I mentioned before, is just kind of do an overview. There's some background information I wanted to just briefly touch upon and then respond to any questions the board might have. The first item on the agenda under here is for this particular topic is just the latest development. So I wanted to make sure that the board had some of the most recent technical memos that have been distributed. We also had, as the board will recall, a very good Zoom meeting the beginning of the winter, end of the fall, beginning of the winter last year. And one of those meetings, one of the questions that came out of that was from people that were interested in the impacts to Bass River. And so the first memo, and it's one that's dated February 4th of 2021, it is in your packet. It addresses that question of effluent recharge at the Bass River Golf Course. And the environmental impacts of the discharge to Bass River Golf Course are positive. That's the bottom line. There's an overall improvement in the water quality to Bass River. And so that memo demonstrates that in a very technical sense, talking about the amount of nitrogen that's in the waterway that needs to be removed, and then how that gets accomplished by removing that from the septic systems, and then discharging a very highly treated effluent at the Bass River Golf Course. So that's a very good technical memo about that issue. The other technical memo that's in your packet is the update of February 2021. That had an original date of July 10th of 2020 on it. That's the CDM Smith memo, which is a summary of the Bass River Golf Course effluent recharge alternatives and costs associated with that. That was an update because we've had a couple of meetings with the Gulf Enterprise Committee about what they'd prefer, timing of construction, impacts to which holes, other improvements that might want to see. They have supported, and I think we reported this last time we gave an update to the board, that the Gulf Enterprise Committee would like to see the master plan scenario that was identified in that memo. That's not the most expensive option, but that was also not the just return it to the way it was option either. That memo does outline what that master plan is and what those options include. The bottom line in that memo is there's a $10 to $12 million additional improvements cost component associated with that. That would be for other areas that aren't impacted by the effluent recharge structures that would be put into the ground. That would also include clubhouse costs for upgrading that. And so a meeting that we had just last week with the Gulf Enterprise Committee to talk about this updated memo was just on the 15th last week. The Gulf Enterprise Committee asked a lot of good questions. We really dived into the memo and the details. And the bottom line is they'll be proposing something to your board about how they'd like to fund those additional costs. So I don't have any updates for you in detail on that, but just expect that the Gulf Enterprise Committee will have some additional information for you for consideration and recommendations on how some of those extra costs could be paid for. Another memo is dated March 10th, so it's hot off the presses, a CDM Smith memo. It's the summary of the updates with regards to the cost for DHY Clean Waters Community Partnership. That is a memo that we essentially had last year. We do expect that given that there's been a delay in this project and in implementing wastewater, that we needed to see some cost updates. The previous cost memo that we had pegged all of our costs at the midpoint of construction being 2022, and that's next year. That just wasn't going to happen. This project has been delayed significantly, and so we need to update the costs. And so the new date that the costs are reflective of is 2024. The end of 2024 for the midpoint of construction. And so that's what that cost memo indicates. There was a increase because of the essentially 2-year delay. So the bad news is the costs are up, but the good news is the revenue projections that we've been working on, and the staff team and Ed Centio and our finance team have been working on. Those projections appear to cover those phase 1 expenses, even at that higher cost. That's something that's been discussed with the Water Resource Advisory Committee, and I'm sure will be a topic of discussion at the Water Resource Advisory Committee meeting next week as well, where we'll have a little bit more detail for them and be able to dive a little deeper into those costs and how we have the revenues projected to cover those costs. With that said, the other component of this agenda item was Appendix A. So as the board is aware, the DHY agreement in essence is the language, the components of that are something that all 3 boards of selectmen for the communities have supported and seem generally comfortable with. But there is some additional supplemental language and detail that several of the communities, including our community, wanted to see some additional information on. And so the direction that we're heading is to put that in an Appendix A for the agreement. It's going to have a lot more detail than would be in kind of the general language associated with the agreement. So the March 10th, 2021 CDM Smith memo with regards to the effluent recharge sites and the timelines, that's a component that's going to be a step in the direction of adding some of that detail to that Appendix A. An overview is that recharge sites will be in all 3 communities, but that memo does detail the timing of when the effluent recharge sites would be needed in each one of the 3 communities and the rough cost impacts associated with those. So that's in essence what that memo is, and Kyle's showing it on the screen there. Has a lot of good detail, and that's another thing, as I mentioned, we'll be reviewing with the Water Resource Advisory Committee and get into some good detail about those discussions. But the timing is all based upon when it needs to be brought online because of the effluent recharge needs for the entire project all the way through build out. There's 3 other components at least that need to be added in the Appendix A that some of the communities have wanted to see. With this, again, provides detail to the agreement. One of those things is the fixed cost versus the semi-fixed cost, and what does that mean, and provide some definition around that. So all the costs that would be considered are considered fixed costs, except for the variable costs associated with power, chemicals, and sludge disposal. So that's how the costs would be broken down. There were some questions about that. It'll be clear in that language in the appendix. Also a flow penalty calculation. There was some concern that if a community exceeds the flow that they committed to, that they would be responsible for a greater share of the operations and maintenance costs. So that, makes sense, and that would be spelled out in what that calculation would look like. And then also the budget. There was some questions, a lot of discussion about the budget and the process, the language and the contract and the agreement spells out what that process is. But there was a interest in having an example budget, and that would be a component within that Appendix A as well. Mansfield, Foxborough, and Norton, as the board is aware of, is another example of a district that is a wastewater district, and they have a example budget that we could include. And so that was suggested that might be an element that we could have in there so people would know what are components of the budget and what that would look like. So those are the components that have been discussed so far for that Appendix A. Given that was one of your sub-agenda items, I think maybe, Mr. Chair, if I could pause here and answer any questions the board might have about that component before we move to the next sub-item, if that's appropriate.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I don't know if there are others on your group, Jeff, whether David, I see David's joining us, or Kurt, if they want to add something to what you presented, I'm happy to do that. Otherwise, we'll just go directly to the board members for questions. All right.
Yeah, I'll leave that up to Kurt Sears. He's been attending all the meetings religiously, as I think you've been to most of them as well, Mr. Chair. And if they have anything they want to add, I tried to sum it up, maybe covered some of that pretty quickly, but it's been a good discussion with other communities.
That's great. Kurt, did you have anything to add, or David?
Not a lot. I would like to see an answer to Tom Nicanello's idea. It seems like on a pretty regular basis, he suggests a second pipe. I think maybe we can get a rough guesstimate of just how cost prohibitive that would probably be to try to return that water back to the town. And Jeff mentioned a budget. It would, like a sample budget. It would be nice to see if using the MNF model, if it gives us a good idea of the operation costs for the customer, the end user, because I think that's going to be an important part of their level of support for this project.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. Let me go around to the board members. Mike Stone.
I don't have any questions at this point.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Dan?
Sticking to Appendix A, I guess the one comment that I've said in the past that I'd like to reiterate is that whenever we arrive at the criteria by which we expect to be compensated on our golf program, the lost revenues, I would hope that that would be fixed once we settle upon the criteria so that other towns don't learn from our experience and get a windfall. I hope that in some way some language is developed in Appendix A to deal with that issue. I know that I've seen some projections from the golf department, and I understand they're coming in, but I've seen their capital plan out 5 years, and they do seem to be able to support a master's level build back. So it'll be interesting for them to come in and show us that and demonstrate their ability to handle that within the enterprise account. And I guess just to Kurt's question or comment, I guess I'm not sure on what Mr. Nicanello's point is. Are we returning the water to what end? I mean, are we expecting that that might be drinkable at some point, or is it being used for other uses? Is it being diverted to other areas other than Bass River? I'm not clear on that particular question that's being raised or potential solutions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, I could touch upon that real
you, Jeff?
briefly, and
Yes.
maybe David Young could add to that if he needs to. But there are other states in the country that embrace this idea of what some call the purple pipe, or the effluent return pipe for irrigation for private property. And that's not something that's happening here in Massachusetts, but states like California, Florida, they do that. It is certainly something that we could take a look at and come up with some rough cost estimates for. It would be pretty expensive, but it's also something that can be done at a later date. I happen to know that some of the communities in Florida that have had wastewater or sewer for a long time are now looking to expand their reclaimed water distribution system. So, just like water or wastewater or any utility, you can always add it at a later date. There are some economies of scale of doing it at the same time, but it's still a very expensive component. We are doing a version of that in that we're using that reclaimed water at our golf course at Bayberry Hills, and there'll be an indirect use of that, and David Young could go in a little more detail, indirect use of that at Bass River. So we are doing a component of that, but not to the extent of returning it to all of the customers, which is essentially what Mr. Nicanello is suggesting.
Thank you.
Good evening, David Young, CDM Smith. Sorry I'm a little late. I'm just leaving the Dennis Selectmen's meeting.
Good thing you didn't have to travel too far.
Pardon?
Good thing you didn't have to travel too far.
Yeah, right. I think I went from one seat to another. From what I'm hearing is the discussion of reclaimed water, bringing the pipe back because it's such a clean, you treat it to such high standards. As Jeff Colby just mentioned, you're one of the only two in the state that uses reclaimed water for irrigating a golf course. It's mandated in Florida, Texas, Arizona, California, because they're very much water short states. It's not mandated here in New England. Believe it or not, even though we have water bans and you hear about droughts and everything, New England is still considered not a water short area. So it's very difficult to overcome the initial cost of adding in those additional pipes. I'm a big believer in using it because it should be considered a product, not a waste material. And as Jeff indicated too, if it were applied at some point to Bass River Golf Course, you pump the groundwater out or you take the water from Laban's Pond, which is where the effluent would come from. So you're indirectly using it. It would still have some nitrogen value and act as fertilizer, same as it does at your Bayberry Hills course, which helps offset some of your commercial fertilizer use.
Thanks, David. So I guess the question I'm asking is, and I just don't want to lose this moment here. Do you think it's worth? He's the chairman of the Water Resources Advisory Committee. He thinks it's a good idea to examine this. Is that something that could be examined a little bit further, Jeff?
So, just so I understand, what was the specific request from a pipe to go from where to where?
Well, I think that needs to be sort of hashed out at the committee level, but I do think that there's some interest in getting a better handle on to what extent that can be done in a way where at least, we understand what that option might entail financially.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we'll commit to talking with the Water Resource Advisory Committee through some of those issues and what direction we might be able to give CDM Smith, or at least maybe come up with some general costs associated with that. I'm sure there's some industry standards that can be applied, and we can look into that a little further.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful just to have some metrics on it so we have an idea of the range of costs that might be involved in doing that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Kurt.
I wasn't advocating for it. I was just trying to answer that question because it's brought up so often. That kind of water use is in our plumbing code, but even at the end user level, what you would have to do to a building to reuse this type of water is very difficult and very expensive. So I just want the answer out there. I'm not saying I'm advocating for it. It's a great idea. But if Dave has like a per foot cost of what he thought it might cost, and what it might take to bring that back to, say, the motel area of Route 28 in West Yarmouth, at least you know that. But again, if you even use it for irrigation, you're gonna have a place to store it once you bring it back over there, that type of thing. So I don't think it's cost effective, but it's a good exercise so that everybody understands.
Well, I don't think we need
what
to
that is.
design the approach here tonight, but I think it's worth a question that's worth examining, at least to provide some answers to. And if it is an option, at least be able to flag it. We don't necessarily need to do a detailed design on it.
Right, exactly, yeah. I think that'd be a waste of money. It's just a
It would.
general
Right.
idea would probably be the way to go.
Yeah. So the next, Tracy, do you have any questions, comments?
I do. I have a couple. I'm recollecting a few years back, Jeff, when we were having a problem with our DEP water usage permits at Bayberry. How is this going to affect that?
Well, that's a good question. Currently, DEP is trying to limit all the communities, including the golf courses, to how much water they use or pump out of the ground. So us being able to supply water that the golf course can use helps them offset their amount of water they need to pump out of the ground. So it's a very positive thing that we're doing.
So they're not going to charge us back for it, because we were getting double charged at one point in time for stuff we were pumping previously.
I don't know about the double charging situation, but I do know that the golf course has been able to reduce the amount of water it pumps out of the ground because of what we supply them. They still have to pump some water, but not as much as they would otherwise.
All right, that might be something you want to look into, because I was under the impression that one of the problems that we had was the water that we were reusing at the time was getting charged against us.
If I might, yeah, that was an internal accounting issue, as I recall, back, it was 10 or 12 years ago now. And that was resolved back then, and it was in terms of how it was being charged and where the monies were being transferred internally amongst different departments. But you're correct, it was being double accounted for initially, but that has long since been corrected.
Okay, so we won't have any
That was
problem.
back under the George O'Leary era.
Sometimes my memory's good. But I just want to make sure that there's no negative,
It doesn't come back to haunt
repercussions, I guess. Yeah. The other thing about Appendix A, I like Appendix A. I think the more that we have written down in detail prior to entering into this agreement is extremely important. But Appendix A doesn't have anything about cost. The only thing that's in our Appendix A, the way I read it in my packet today, is the maps.
Well, the Appendix A, a component of that is related to the revenue impacts. And we've been meeting with our Scott and the GEC to get a handle on that. And I think the memo does spell out, this is the February 2021 memo.
Yeah, I see the memo, but where Appendix A starts is after the memo, prior to the maps. So, well, at least in the way that it's written in my packet. So I'm just trying to see if we are going to incorporate some of the costs, fixed and otherwise detail. You had mentioned that it would be outlined in Appendix A. So there's more to it than just what's in this attachment, I'm assuming then?
Yeah, the way it was intended to be handled, if I might add, Jeff, we did the cost memo, which I believe was in your packet, of how the costs were generated for applying the effluent at the Bass River Golf Course, the restore master plan and build out options. And then we looked at the lost revenue in discussions, looked at 4 years of revenues and expenses from the golf course, came up with that. That was all to develop a project cost, which has now been implemented into your overall program costs for the DHY program. At some point, that would be part of the town's plan, because if you do it on your own, you would use Buck Island first and then switch over to Bass River. But the idea of when it's actually defined would be in your land use agreement that's described in section 3. We could append this or outline it as a means, if you like, in Appendix A. But the goal was to have that defined between the commissioners and the Board of Selectmen, using that as a guideline.
Okay. Okay, one of the other questions I had, and this could have to do with the fact that we're not going with the flat rebuilding, we're going with an upgrade. But when you look at Table 8, the revised master plan, why is it that items like the bunker is only reimbursed or by the DHY at 20%? Is that because the other 80% are options that we're taking above and beyond?
Yeah, what we looked at, good question. What we looked at is if you were just restoring the course to put in the leaching fields, what areas would you be impacting? Anything outside of that, such as you're making improvements to bunkers in holes that have nothing to do with where the leaching fields are going,
Okay,
then that was the cost to Yarmouth.
all right. I just want to make sure I understood that correctly, that it was in fact an upgrade or a change on our choice, but not just being reimbursed at a lower percent if it had to do
Correct.
it. Okay. I know we'll get to talk to the Golf Enterprise Committee. You know, I guess I've sat here long enough that, you know, with the funding source that we had before, you know, there was a time when we wanted to do the $2 million upgrade to Bayberry, and they had the funds and assured us that it could be funded within their budget. And then 2 years later, they're like, oh, you know, we don't have the money to cover it. So I just want to make sure that when we're looking at the reimbursement, and I know Ed's on the line, that this is something that we're not using a 1 year. Last year was a really great year. I think COVID had a lot to do with it, people outside. I just think a longer term look back on funding and income, revenues and expenses holistically come into play, because like I said, I was a huge proponent for pushing to do the $2 million in upgrades and not waiting because of the cost going up, and that the experience would be better and we get better revenues out of it. So I was very disappointed, you know, in a year's time, and it was that quickly after we weren't even finished with the project that we didn't have the money to fund it. So I just want to be sure that we're really looking at that and not just taking 1 or 2 years into account, because 3 years ago, you know, golf was going down, less people were playing, you know the story. So are we just talking about the DHY agreement at this point in time, or are we asking questions about the intermunicipal agreement as well? Mr. Chairman, we're going to get back to that.
I think if you have a question on that topic right now, I mean, why not bring that up?
Okay. Well, I just wanted to be sure that it had been reviewed by council.
On the DHY agreement?
No, on the Lewis Bay watershed.
Oh, on that.
Yeah, that Lewis Bay watershed was going to be one of my other updates, and that's really just an FYI for you.
Okay.
We have not had any discussions with Barnstable about that document specifically. Hopefully next week, we'll be having our first discussions with the Barnstable town staff about that. So that inclusion in your packet was more just a FYI. We also do need to do one of those watershed agreements for the Bass River watershed with Dennis. So it is somewhat independent of DHY, but it is part of an overall wastewater update for the board.
And is this part, I mean, I see a lot of benefits to this, and I think it's a great idea, but is it being forced upon us due to 208 planning?
It's a requirement as part of your overall wastewater planning. Barnstable happens to be a little further along with their wastewater planning, so DEP has flagged this as an item they need to address with Yarmouth, and so that's why their interest is higher. We do have to do this also with Dennis because we have shared watersheds. If we had all watersheds within Yarmouth's borders, then we wouldn't need to do this, but because of the shared watershed element, we need to do that with both of our neighboring communities. And David, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but it's required.
Yeah, just in addition, it is required because those watersheds have been given a TMDL, a total maximum daily load, administered by EPA, being helped to be implemented with the Mass Department of Environmental Protection. So DEP will require you to have a watershed permit. And, you know, when you share a watershed, it needs to be amongst those entities. Pleasant Bay has 4 communities. I believe the draft permit that Barnstable sent you was, they used the template for the Mashpee, Sandwich, and Barnstable 3 bays watershed permit that has been signed. I believe those are actually the only 2 that have actually been formalized. But DEP is, I actually sit on a subcommittee that DEP put together where they're revising Title V to put nitrogen removal requirements in for on-site systems if you're in a nitrogen impaired watershed. And if the community has not signed a watershed permit with DEP to address and implement their plan that's defined in their comprehensive wastewater management plan, then by a certain date, they will require each landowner to install a innovative alternative nitrogen removal system.
Okay.
So that's the impetus that DEP is using to get these watershed permits signed by the different communities.
That's helpful. Thank you. That would be a enormous burden.
Yes. And it's all administrated by the towns, believe it or not. So it's a bigger burden.
Well, I mean, that's one thing, but the cost of an IA on every property is just not
Correct.
even cost.
And it doesn't meet the TMDLs in several cases.
Yeah. I guess the only other thing with DHY is that when we talked about having an update, there was some other information I was told or update from the other communities. David, can you talk a little bit?
That's going to be on the next part of the agenda, Tracy.
Oh, okay.
We're gonna get to the update in a second.
I get excited about these things, Mark.
That's great.
I can't even help
That's
myself.
great. That's great. No, that's good. And I'm glad you brought up the intermunicipal agreement because I think it's appropriate to talk about that now. So let me go to Eric before we go
Thank
much.
you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few comments based on the questions that I have been getting. Number one is to the timing of the project. And it sounds like Jeff Colby said that this will not be a 2022 project, but will be pushed out a little bit further. Is that correct?
What I was referring to with the dates that I used earlier were that the cost estimates were based upon midpoint of construction being the end of 2024. So we're still coordinating with Mass DOT on a regular basis to make sure our pipe installation is a component of their Route 28 projects. And so that's a huge cost savings. And those projects are on the tip and being planned. There is some movement proposed in the schedules for those, but we're still coordinating so that we can make sure that we're properly tied in with their plans when they do move forward. But with that said, the most recent schedule that we have for the first project up along Route 28, which is the Bass River Route 28 Old Main Street, North Main Street project that's going to be combined and tied together, is to go out to advertisement in 2023. And so that's coming up rather quickly when we need to make sure that we have pipe designs and wastewater components incorporated within their plans. So it's a lengthy design process and we can't just throw it in at the last minute. We need to make sure that it's in at the appropriate time. And we're told that the appropriate time in which to include those design components is the 75% design stage for that project, as it is with the other project as well. But that's coming up very soon. And that was going to be a component of my other update, but I can get into that a little bit now. And that is the timing of this is very critical for us to make sure that we continue to make progress with incorporating our wastewater collection system within Mass DOT's timing for their projects. And that's one of the things that puts a little pressure on us to make sure that we're doing this soon. That's not the same for Dennis and Harwich, who have projects with Mass DOT that they can coordinate, but they're not happening as soon as the Yarmouth projects are. So with that said, that's the reason we're looking to move this along quickly so we can be properly coordinated with Mass DOT.
Thank you, Jeff. I guess I should have been a little bit more specific. The nature of my question was more specifically to the disruption of the golf course.
Oh. The disruption of the golf course, that's a question that we jumped into with the Golf Enterprise Committee and have had discussions every time we meet with them about what the timing of that looks like. And there is flexibility in that because we're anticipating that the construction impacts will be 18 months. It can happen on the sooner end of a 5-year period, if you will, or a latter end. So we have some flexibility on when that construction could impact the golf course. That's what we've talked to the Golf Enterprise Committee about. So we'll certainly be working closely with them as to what the best window might be for that impact. So there's no definitive date for the construction impacts because other elements of the wastewater project, can happen sooner. And that can be delayed. Takes an awful long time to design and build a wastewater treatment plant as it does for designing and implementing the collection system. So the golf impact specifically, we have a couple year window in which we can make that happen, working around their schedule.
Okay, thank you. The other two questions I've been getting is, what will the impact be to the design of the golf course, as well as what are the plans for the clubhouse? But it sounds like we'll be getting a presentation from the GEC at some point to discuss those two things. I do echo Tracy's sentiments about, being cautious about basing our ability to pay for improvements on one windfall year. So, I think we'll need to keep that in mind when we do hear the Golf Enterprise Committee's plans for things that are over and above reimbursables and will fall entirely on Yarmouth. So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. What I'd like to do now is to go into the second section of this agenda item, and that is to talk a little bit about where the other towns stand with respect to their town meetings and presenting an agreement.
Okay, great, Mr. Chair. I can discuss that. That was a lengthy item that we talked with both Dennis and Harwich about at our last meeting to make sure that we're characterizing that correctly. And the Dennis position is it appears they're planning to postpone the DHY Clean Waters Community Partnership Agreement article at their Springtown meeting. Their reasoning was related to COVID impacts, limiting their outreach opportunities. They really feel it's important that they need to further educate their voters and the people that will attend town meeting for such a large funding program. They were also had some concerns because Harwich is expressing that they're not ready to address the DHY at this time as well. So that's Dennis's position. Harwich's position is they fully expect the Board of Selectmen at tomorrow night's meeting to withdraw the DHY town meeting article. Again, that's their tomorrow night meeting. That hasn't officially happened yet, but that's what they're expecting to happen based upon their, readiness and preparing for town meeting. They need more time to kind of look at these options, and it may even wait until spring 2022, which is a very unfortunate situation for us. But the reason for that is they typically don't have fall town meetings. And if they do, this is at this point doesn't look like it's likely to come up as an item for their fall town meeting. But all of that is still to be determined. So we'll have more concrete positions to give you, but those were the indications from the representatives as to where they stand. And the last piece that I have as far as the DHY subgroup meetings is we don't have another one planned until June, given that there's still a lot of uncertainty about what's happening with the Springtown meeting articles, and a meeting in June, we have more definitive information and we may even be able to start preparing for fall town meetings at that point. So that's what I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, one of the things that I think we're all concerned about is at some point the clock runs out and we've got to stay with our schedule. So, you know, one option clearly is the fall, but I don't really think we have much more time. I mean, this was supposed to have been concluded. I believe when we met, we started meeting in the spring of 2017. Where our plan was to be concluded in the year 2020. And we're off a year. And I think Harwich is looking at perhaps a delay that could be as long as yet another year. And we're already, in terms of our work, locked into a schedule. So, you know, at some point we've got to fish or cut bait on DHY. And I'm just curious when that time frame is. And I'm interested in hearing more from you, Jeff, and David on that. Because I don't think we have much more time.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I touched upon that in my answer to Selectman Tolly's question previously, but we need to make sure that our design is coordinated with Mass DOT's work so we don't miss that window. You know, we've been long talking about how we want to do the project together with DOT and their project so we can save millions of dollars. That starts with the design. That's not just starting with the construction. It takes time to develop plans and to decide whether we're going to be sending the wastewater to Dennis or to Buck Island if we do a go-it-alone solution in Yarmouth. And those things need to be decided during the design stage, and we're in the design stage. And so I would completely agree that time is critical for us. In fact, given the schedules that we're seeing from Mass DOT, I would suggest that the fall is our drop dead date for making sure that we're properly including the Yarmouth wastewater design within the Mass DOT plans.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Go right ahead.
Given that we're now facing a maybe 1 year, maybe 2 year delay with partners that seem non-committal at best at this point, you know, at what point does the cost of doing this project alone become less than the escalation costs of waiting 2 years for other towns to maybe come on board?
Good question.
Well, that's an excellent question. Do you want to take a stab at it, Jeff and Dave?
Yeah, for the detailed costs, I would certainly defer to David on those items. But yeah, we're seeing just from the most recent update to the cost memo that costs are going up. They're completely expected to go up. And I'm hearing from some other projects that they've gone up pretty significantly. So even just a 1 year delay is a pretty significant cost. And as I think Selectman Tolly is alluding to, the difference in the capital costs between a go-it-alone solution and a DHY solution, at least for the Yarmouth costs, is relatively small and will get easily eaten up by inflation if we wait too long. So exactly when that happens, is it 1 year out? Is it 2 years out? I would defer to David on that, but we're close to that time frame. It's not like there's a large delta. It's a relatively small delta for us.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman,
right ahead.
If at this point we are to wait for partners to come on board, and then in 2 years, one or both don't come on board, where are we then? I mean, the escalation costs will be far greater than a Yarmouth alone solution at that point.
Well, the term that Jeff used was drop dead date. So from what I'm hearing from our group is that we've got to have a game plan for the fall.
Well, I, for one, am tired of being held hostage by a couple of potential partners,
right,
while the clock is running and the meter is running as well. You know, it's becoming more and more clear to me, and I have always been an advocate for a Yarmouth only solution, that that is becoming more and more the better solution at this point. We can't afford to wait, and our potential partners don't seem to have any interest in doing this in a timely manner.
Yeah, I would just only add, you're right on. As inflation costs go up at 3 to 5% a year, and you look at the cost of your program, you're talking many millions of dollars in these waiting cycles. And, we all thought we were going to town meeting last spring. We know why that didn't happen, but that was delayed. We thought we were going the previous fall. So, that's at least 18 months. So if you go this current fall for your own decision, that's 2 years later at 10% increase in cost. Just due to inflation.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It just, this partnership is making less and less sense to me every time we talk about this.
I understand. Thank you, Eric. Let me just go around again. Go back to Mike. Mike Stone, you want to comment on this, Mike?
Certainly. I'm very disappointed, to say the least, to hear what these other two towns are doing, or not doing, I should say. And to Eric's point, this is going to become increasingly more expensive due to delay. And guess who has a major part of the expense? Yarmouth. So the impact on us is going to be proportionally more than it's going to be on Dennis and Harwich. I've always supported the regional concept. I think it makes a lot of sense, but that presupposes that the three towns are in harmony, that there's a spirit of cooperation, and that they all want to do it just as much as the other towns do. Harwich seems like they are indecisive at this point as to whether they even want to do this. Dennis doesn't seem to have a sense of urgency either. So while I still support the concept of a regional plant, I'm kind of rethinking it along the lines that Eric is suggesting. And I have a question in that regard. How much work and how much time, Dave, would it take to turn this design into a Yarmouth-only solution?
Well, as you may recall, we had certain portions of it designed back in 2010, 2011. A lot has changed since then, so it'd take a while to update the treatment plant portion of it. The pipelines, we're having to coordinate with MassDOT because they're doing drainage improvements and widening that road and some other things, but the pipeline drawings were pretty well along, as were the pumping stations along that stretch of road. The question is, where does that pumping station at Parker's River pump to? Does it just pump to the other end of Route 28 to the east end, or does it pump to Buck Island because it's going to be the main pumping station for all the wastewater down south? That's really the biggest decision. But, you're still looking at probably a year to 2 years for final designs in coordination with MassDOT on those projects for a Yarmouth-only solution. But, the control in terms of when things are put out to bid, number of contracts, all those things are all within the town of Yarmouth's decision at that point, because you're controlling not only collection, which you would always be doing, but collection and treatment and effluent recharge.
The thing that notwithstanding what you just said, the thing that Eric pointed out is you're talking about a couple of years probable delay in doing a Yarmouth only design. But as Eric suggested, if you get strung along by these other towns and then you're out 2 years and still nothing happens, then where are you? Are we out 3 years, 4 years? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I would think if you want to continue to
proceed on a Yarmouth only basis, you'd know you'd have a concrete product at a certain point in time. That's all I'm. See, you really don't know if these people are going to come in.
Yeah, I mean, if you would continue to pursue the DHY, I would put it that you would need to know from the other two towns this fall, no later than, so that you don't get strung out 2 years. You need to give them a deadline.
I agree. But then, what happens if Dennis is in and Harwich is out. How much of an adjustment time-wise is that? Well, that would take a new agreement, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Take a
It
brand new.
would be a new agreement, but it would,
Back to step one.
yeah, well, not necessarily. I mean, that would give you options. You could do, if just two towns, you could do an intermunicipal agreement. You wouldn't even need to go back and do the special legislation. You wouldn't need that.
We could do that.
And you could use the current agreement as a framework for going forward, but
Right,
Would
but
the
these are the,
legislation have to be changed?
yes,
Yeah, and how much time does that take? We saw that.
right.
Well, I didn't hear Tracy's comment.
Tracy was asking about the DHY agreement. Basically, the way it was drafted legislatively was it was designed as a 3-town project.
So it would take.
It was not designed. Yeah, it was not designed as a 2-town with 1 town adding in. It was sort of, the assumption was that the 3 towns were going to move ahead and move forward. And so something that would have to be redone. But the thing is, I think one of the reasons why I wanted this discussion on the agenda tonight is that the clock is running. We're looking at more delays, and we've got to fish or cut bait and pick a time soon on when to do that and identify all the things that need to be done in order us to sort of have our plan B teed up in time to move forward on it. So we don't have to figure this out tonight, but I think we need to send a message to the administration, to Jeff and our consultant and the Water Resources Advisory Committee that we need to be prepared to move. And we need to start identifying these discrete issues and components that need to be sorted out. That's the point of this discussion.
Yeah.
But before I don't want to go on any further. I just want to go finish the round here. Dan, you're next. Do you have and then I'll go to Tracy.
Like my fellow board members, I'm disappointed at what's happened. I think it's premature at this point to throw out the partnership concept. I think there's an awful lot of benefits to both Dennis and Yarmouth to still work toward that end goal. What I'm hearing from Jeff and Dave seems to indicate to me that we do not need to make this drop dead decision until the fall meeting. I think it would be wise for us to start discussions about, whether it's a Dennis and Yarmouth agreement or whether it's DHY. I don't consider Harwich as key as I do Dennis. I think that we're going to save almost as much money with the DY partnership as we are with the DHY. Harwich isn't so much a concern for me, but Dennis is. And they have as much to lose as we do if we do not do this partnership. But Eric's point is well taken. If we wait too long, then it becomes losses in inflation that start to eat away at any savings we might realize. So I think it's necessary that we really start working on the details of whether it's a DHY agreement. Maybe, we start having some informal conversations with Dennis about just a DY partnership, because Harwich seems to be the outlier. But, if we do some of that work now, working through the end, the spring meeting, and are prepared to make an absolute decision by the fall, it seems to me that we don't lose anything at that point. Some of Dennis's justifications, I think, are fair. COVID had knocked all 3 towns for a loop. And so that cost us a year. That's nobody's fault. And Dennis is also indicating a desire to slow down simply because of outreach. And to some extent, I think that's fair, because we're doing this discussion tonight by Zoom. Our meetings are by Zoom. Our ability to really get the message out to our voters so that they completely understand the choices that we have been hampered by our situation with COVID. So is it unreasonable to ask to go to the fall meeting? I don't think so at this point, but I think we need to start putting the pieces in play behind the scenes so that if Dennis or Harwich or both of them decide they are not ready to join us in the fall, then we go it alone. It's certainly not what we want, but we're tied to the DOT construction model. So I say, if it's my best recommendation at this point would be to do the work behind the scenes, wait to pull the trigger at the fall meeting, and then we'll be ready either to go with a DY partnership, a DHY partnership, or a Yarmouth only operation. And I'm just as pointed as everybody else is. This is not how this should be playing out, but to be fair, COVID has affected this. And I want to give us as good a chance to do this in a partnership for all of the many reasons that we've talked about of why a partnership is a better way to go than trying to do this alone. The operational costs, the maintenance costs, the money that we can save possibly on borrowing, the environmental impacts of having 5 different treatment facilities up and down the coast of Cape Cod. They just go on and on. So I don't think we should prematurely throw out the partnership. I think we just have to be careful and make sure that we're doing our work behind the scenes to make sure that come fall, we know what we can do and we're ready to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Dan. Tracy Post.
Thanks. I remember writing the agreement, and the agreement said it will be brought at your very next town meeting. That's how the agreement read. It will be brought forward at your very next town meeting. Scenarios with COVID aren't ideal, but I think we need to bring it at annual, and I would like this board to urge all the towns to bring it at the annual and not wait till fall, because we need an answer one way or the other. I think, it may not even be it may be Yarmouth that doesn't support it. We need to move forward because fish or cut bait. Is that what you said, Mark? I think that's a great analogy. Time's ticking. As time ticks, we could wait till fall. We could wait till another year, and then the people of Harwich may not pass it. And then we've waited a year for nothing. So I'd rather know that now. And, if you want to do outreach, we've had a committee, an amazing committee working on it. And I know they have committees that are working on it too, and they'll do the best they can. And the fact that, we're putting our town meeting off until May, you'll hopefully we'll have a higher percentage of people with it outdoors. And I'm sure they're probably doing something similar, but I personally don't want to wait till fall. I think we really need an answer. And with all due respect to a 2-town partnership, my interest in a partnership without 3 towns is minimal. I think that we really need the 3 towns to balance it. That's what makes it intriguing, not only financially, but in many respects. I don't know if a 2-town, what we haven't even done the math to see what a 2-town looks like at this point. So, and maybe we do need to do that, but we're waiting till fall to do that instead of having that answer by fall. If we can't get them to put it on for annual, we're going to have to go back with fall for something else. Otherwise, we would go from fall all the way to next annual. It's just.
I understand. I wasn't expecting tonight for us to have all the answers, but I did want us to get fully briefed on where we stand, where we are financially in terms of our own costs, where we stand in terms of the other towns.
Can I just ask David a
Correct.
question?
Yes, Tracy.
David, if we built our plant on Buck Island as we had planned in the original, is there a potential that we could allow a second community to buy into that? Is it too far from a second community in its locale that if Dennis decides, 10 years from now or 5 years from now, they want to opt into our plan? Is it cost effective to build it to that extent, and is it actually feasible?
That's a good question. That site is the farthest away from, quote, the centroid or the middle of the three towns, which happen to be the Dennis DPW site. That's what made putting the treatment plant there so attractive for all three towns. But the other issue you would have is the effluent recharge site, so the farthest away from Buck Island Road as well. So if you build that as your largest treatment plant, then you've got a much more conveyance cost for sending the effluent back to other towns to recharge. One option you could consider is going back to Barnstable and seeing if they wanted to send some of their wastewater to Yarmouth for treatment. And then they bring it back for recharge or whatever the deal is. But that would be the other option that might open up.
Is there a need in Barnstable for them to expand their plant at this time?
They have treatment capacity at the plant, from what I understand. Their biggest issue is finding acceptable effluent recharge sites. But if there was a way, they have areas over off Yarmouth Road that they're looking to expand that are still within Lewis Bay. They're planning to put a pumping station over there on 28, just this side of the Dunkin' Donuts area, that low point, to then pump to their treatment plant. You know, that could be pumped over into the Yarmouth system because you're right up on 28 with your sewers there up to the property line. So there might be some little, I'm not talking a lot of flow, but there are options there to help spread cost. But other than that, you're pretty much at the extremity of where things were, which makes it more costly to try to recover those costs by economy of scale.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mike. Thanks, Don.
Dave, it would seem to me that a Dennis Yarmouth solution would still probably be more financially advantageous than Yarmouth doing it alone from a cost point of view. And Harwich then could possibly come in later because the basic scheme of the plant and the strategic location of the plant would be preserved as it was in the three-town system. In fact, the Foxborough, Norton, Mansfield project, I think Mansfield initially built the plant and these other towns came in later. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
So what's your, what's your offhanded response to a two-town solution, assuming that Harwich would not be a willing partner, at least presently?
Yeah, no, the cost advantages are almost exactly the same for Yarmouth and Dennis. We've done some back of the envelope costs. Harwich was the small percentage. They were 15%. So Yarmouth and Dennis split that. Your percentages are almost the same in terms of what your savings would be. And yes, you could form the partnership and Harwich could buy in, maybe at a premium, since you've taken the initiative to go build the plant. And if they come in later, then, maybe there's a premium that they pay to come in, but certainly they could be added as a member town later. And the agreement that's currently worded would allow another member community to come in as a customer to Dennis, Harwich, or Yarmouth. So those options are there. That scenario is viable.
Oh, if I could, Mr.
Go right ahead,
just a quick comment. I think what we should do is have a drop dead date in the fall, but at the same time, have discussions with Dennis about seeing what their feelings are about doing a two-town solution in the event that Harwich doesn't go along, and have that as an alternative.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Anybody else? Like I said, I don't think we need to make a decision tonight, but I do think it would be helpful for our engineer, our DPW team, and our Water Resources Advisory Committee to come back to us relatively soon given the current situation, given the current developments, come back with recommendations, including an assessment of that option, as well as the option of going alone and looking at the costs and benefits. But you're right, we're facing a moment this fall, and it behooves us to become very prepared for all our options. And then, as Tracy said, there's also the option of continuing to push for the three-town. Now, I think we had all gone into this in the beginning thinking that we would all go to town meeting together, but obviously that's not going to happen. So the question is one of the questions for us to have answered would be, what do we do with the DHY agreement as such at the Yarmouth town meeting? I mean, that is an option. And as Tracy said, her suggestion for the board is definitely worth thinking about. And that is maybe we just continue to press ahead, take our own three-town agreement to town meeting and at least get a decision on that, as well as exploring all these other items. What I don't want to do is sort of hammer out a game plan tonight without having the benefit of some at least further thought and some further deliberation. Not now that David and Jeff and Kurt and some of the committee members that are watching can hear what we're wrestling with. I think what I'd like to do is get their best advice within short order in terms of how we handle the upcoming town meeting and how we handle when we start doing planning for Plan B and Plan C. One of the plans clearly has got to be Yarmouth going it alone. And then, as you said, Mike, you've got Dennis and Yarmouth, the pros and cons of that, with Harwich coming in later. So let me just stop right there. I see Kurt Sears is raising his hand. I'm going to recognize Kurt. Kyle, can you get Kurt on?
Okay, I'm here.
Okay. You got
just some things to consider. Obviously, we have to change the dates on DHY if we go forward, but I'm okay with that. The other thing, if we decide to do a Yarmouth Dennis only, is to look at the favorable financing and things like debt forgiveness, and maybe even that bond bill that had design money for us. If we could, it sounds like my conversation with Tim Whalen that he could maybe make that happen so we could still protect that $1 million to go towards design. So I would think about those items as we move forward.
Yeah. But I think what I'd like to do, if it's okay with my fellow board members, is to put all these questions on your lap with our consultant and with Jeff, and have you come back as soon as you can to update the board on what your recommendations are going ahead, starting with how do we handle the articles at town meeting before we make a decision to maybe pull the DHY article, because right now it's on the warrant.
Okay, the RAC is meeting on Monday, and hopefully with Jeff and Dave's help, we can get some answers to those questions sooner rather than later.
Before we go much further, I'm going to just ask my fellow board members, are you comfortable with that approach? Getting them to assess the impacts of all this and to come back with a set of recommendations on all of these questions that have been sort of raised tonight. Mike, are you okay with that?
I am, Mr. Chairman, except that I don't think we should go forward with the article if the other two towns are not. I think this should be done simultaneously.
Okay. Dan, are you?
Yeah, they're the gentlemen who have the most knowledge. I'd like to hear their expertise on the question and then make a decision based on it.
Okay. Eric, are you?
I'm okay with that, but as part of the next presentation, I would like to see a detailed outline of, again, what a Yarmouth only solution costs if we were to go full steam ahead, as opposed to what it's going to cost in inflation or escalation, whatever term you want to use, what those costs will be in, 1 year from now, 2 years from now. And I'd really like to see if the inflation will overcome the cost, the additional cost to Yarmouth going it alone, because I suspect that it will.
Fair. Tracy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good plan. We need input from everybody, but my push would be to go back and re-ask the other communities to put it on their annual. Ours is on there. I don't really want to wait till fall. I know we can, but it's another half a year.
Yeah. Well, we can check, Tracy. I think that ship has sailed, though. I think we can double check. I mean, this is Jeff, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong here, but they were pretty definitive in terms of their statements at our last DHY meeting. They made it very, very clear what their intentions were. And I will admit openly that I expressed my disappointment in the fact that the clock is running on us. We have a lot of momentum and we've got a lot of work to do, and we're locked into a schedule. And that we have as I said, a Fisher cut bait deadline coming up that I don't think any of us want to miss. So we're sort of locked in.
The agreement itself says the next annual town meeting. So here we are. So now, I mean, they can choose to put it off, but they're violating the agreement. So this is just the first, it's just frustrating that this is the way we're starting.
I understand. So
maybe they need to reread the agreement, what they agreed to.
I hear what you're saying. So do you understand the charge, Jeff and Dave and Kurt?
Yeah, I think you've been very clear. I know Kurt's on the call, and so he understands. We'll have discussions starting as early as Monday with Water Resource Advisory. There's probably other committee members that are on this call as well, listening very carefully, because obviously this is a very important discussion.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Does anybody else on the board wish to be heard before we conclude with this item?
Just to add in, I can tell you that Dennis tonight was only discussing 2 wastewater articles. One was to put money in a stabilization account, and second one was to fund survey and preliminary design for phase 1 of their collection system.
So let me make sure I understand that, David. So while they may be postponing DHY, they are talking about setting aside funds.
They still want to move forward with their program because, they understand the cost of delays too.
Okay.
So COVID doesn't affect that.
Okay. Well, that's important to know. That's an important.
Yeah, they already have the money in their stabilization account, so they're just transferring that. That's part of their reasoning, right or wrong.
Very good. All right. So we expect to hear from our team as soon as you're ready to brief us and update us. So we'll be looking to schedule that very soon.
Okay, Mr. Chair, if I may, I have one other brief update, if that's acceptable.
Go right ahead while you have the floor.
This has been a very good discussion, somewhat discouraging because of, some of the recent events, but I did want to end on a positive note. And that is Parker's River Bridge, after many years of planning and a couple of years of construction now, as of this week will be open. The flow restriction will be completely open to the full width of the bridge design, which was 30 feet. That is as of this week. So that's a major milestone for our nitrogen, mitigation issues. And this is not sewer related, but it is the overall plan to open restrictions. And this is one that'll be open as of this week for Parker's River Bridge. So that's a big deal for us. It's, again, not sewer and pipe in the ground related, but it is a major milestone for that project as of this week to be open to the full width.
That's great. Thank you for bringing that up, Jeff. Okay.
Thank you.
So I think we're done with this item. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is board and committee actions, committee appointments. Mr. Horgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First thing that we have on our agenda is a recommendation by the Community Housing Committee. They are asking that we allow a modification or amendment of the membership of their committee, basically changing the requirement that a Yarmouth Housing Authority liaison be on their committee as a full member, and changing that for a planning board member. When I spoke with Mary Wigan and Nate, their explanation to me has been that it's been very difficult to get a member of the Housing Authority to come to their meetings, and the planning board is there routinely. And they feel that this is an appropriate change and would ask for our support.
Okay, before I ask for a motion, are there any questions of Dan regarding this request? Okay, do I have a motion?
Well, I thought the planning board already had members on the community housing, an appointee.
They were an alternate member and the
Alternates, right.
Housing Authority was the full member. Their suggestion is to switch those two
Right.
designations.
The problem always is the planning board is tasked to so many committees.
Yep.
But if
But
they're
they-
okay with it,
Yeah, they've been very present at the meetings, and that's why they're suggesting this change.
I make a motion, we approve the change.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Roll call vote. Mike Stone,
Aye.
Dan Horgan,
aye.
Eric Tolley,
Aye.
Tracy Post.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Carries unanimously. Mr. Horgan.
Next, Mr. Chairman, I make a recommendation to appoint Mr. Jay Frappry. And I'm going to amend this. PM mistook my email. I am suggesting that he be appointed as a full member to the Board of Appeals for a 5-year term to run through January. 5 years from now is what, 2026? And I can explain that if someone has a question.
I have a question real quickly, Dan. Is who stepped down? Did we lose somebody?
No, the ZBA has been desperately looking for some extra members. They're totally dependent on the alternates to be able to reach a quorum to have hearings.
Okay.
And speaking with Steve DeYoung, he asked me to find a couple of people that could be appointed to help fill out the meetings and to lessen the strain on some of the alternate members. Mr. Frappry comes from another community and has extensive planning and zoning experience. So we interviewed him earlier, or actually last week, and Steve made a recommendation that we appoint him as a full member.
So that brings me questions though. If nobody stepped down, what is isn't the committee charge only for 5 full members?
Yeah, but there's only 3 currently.
So that we only have 3 full members.
Yes.
Somebody has stepped down.
All I know is when I came on to as the appointments chairman, there are only 3 full-time members and there's 4 alternates.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
I think, Mr. Chairman, the experience has been that there's volunteers for the alternate positions,
Right.
but not the full-time positions.
Right.
Now we have one. Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion, a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, roll call vote. Mike Stone,
Aye.
Tracy Post,
Aye.
Dan Horgan,
Aye.
Eric Tolley.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Next,
Next, Mr. Chairman, recommendation to reappoint Ms. Evelyn Beal as a regular member to the Disability Commission. The appointment is for a 3-year term to run through March 2024.
So moved.
do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, roll call vote. Mike Stone,
Aye.
Tracy Post,
Aye.
Dan Horgan,
Aye.
Eric Tolley.
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is approval of minutes for the April 28th, 2020 meeting. Does anybody have any recommended changes to the minutes of the April 28th, 2020 meeting? Hearing no, do you need more time? I'm not hearing any recommended edits or changes, so I'm going to ask for a motion.
It's
Do I
so
have a-
long ago, I forget.
It was a while ago.
It's a year ago, almost.
Yes.
I moved the minutes.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Roll call vote, Mike Stone,
Aye.
Tracy Post,
Aye.
Dan Horgan,
Abstain?
Eric Tolley.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. So we got that 4 and 1 extension. Okay, the next item is the approval and release of executive session minutes for September 11th, 2018, September 25th, 2018, October 2nd, 2018, October 16th, 2018, and November 20th, 2018. I'm just going to ask if there's any proposed edits for any of those executive session meeting minutes.
Those are in a different packet, right?
Yep.
Yes. I will note that I did check with counsel, special counsel, who was part of all these minutes to ensure that it was okay to release them, and Ms. Edelman said yes. And I think hopefully that memo was in the packet.
Great, thank you, Bob. Do I have a motion to approve and release?
Give me 1 second.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Would board members like more
Comment,
time?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Horgan.
I'm kind of surprised at the delay. 2018 minutes being released in 21
Right.
sounds unacceptable.
Well, we have an interim town administrator who's been doing an enormous amount of house cleaning. So I would leave it at that. And that's what's going on right now. So I appreciate all the work that Bob is putting in and taking care of this.
Yeah, I have no criticism of him. I'm trying to figure out why it took this long to get these out.
Yeah, well, I think that's a question for the prior administrator.
Okay.
All right. So we've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? No more discussion. A roll call vote. Mike Stone.
Aye.
Tracy Post.
Aye.
Eric Tolley.
Aye.
Dan Horgan.
Abstain.
And chair votes aye. Okay, upcoming agenda review. So let's go to our next meeting, which is March 30th. And Bob, is there anything that
On the 30th, the only other thing, there's a change of manager at Seafood Sam's. I'm just adding that. Other than that, on the 30th, no. On April 6th, there were several changes. I have talked with the school superintendent, and she and I agreed that she would, she asked, we'll delay her presentation until April 13th.
Okay.
And we'll insert in there, you need to vote on the ballot questions. We're going to have a presentation by the police department on the body cameras that he'd like to implement. And then the Historic Commission is going to give you an update on the town seal review. So then on the 13th, we do the DY budget review, Cape Cod Commission update, and there's an entertainment license that I'll talk with Mr. Stone about.
Okay.
And then 20th, I think, was the same. And then the 27th, I'm going to be talking to the Finance Committee to see if they will be prepared, along with the Capital Budget Committee, to have their required hearings on the 27th of April. Because we need to get that block checked off. By then, we should have votes from the Finance Committee, I believe, and we have some advertising deadlines that we would need to meet to get on to the 27th.
Got it. Now, let me ask you, Bob, on April 6th, I believe that's the first meeting of Mr. Rittenhour.
Yes, it is.
So we gotta save a couple of thorny agenda items for the 6th, I would think.
Oh, I could load it up if you'd like.
I'll ask how
But
the
he's
other
going to be,
board members-
I might not, because he's going to be my boss.
Oh, I
So I may
see.
want to be a little careful.
We'll have them jump into the deep end of the pool.
There you go. There you go. Are there any agenda items that board members wish to comment on, or maybe suggest we consider taking up in this stretch of next 4 or 5 meetings?
Bob, are you going to talk about that outdoor license extension tonight on town administrator items? Or are we gonna put that on as an agenda item later?
I was considering later, I've drafted the memo. It's going to be circulated this weekend. What this is we, just briefly, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Go right ahead.
I had a conversation with the Chamber of Commerce director, and she expressed a concern that if the governor eliminate or cancels the emergency, there is a provision that 60 days after that cancellation, the rules change, and outdoor seating, alcohol service outside will change. So the question was, could we be prepared if we know that the governor is going to change it, and then have necessary hearings, all together to allow people to continue to have alcohol service outside, maybe till the end of the year. I have talked, and in the memo, I state I have talked to the building commissioner. He would be okay with having service outside, with the understanding that the occupancy is the occupancy. If there's a 60 person, as an example, 60-person occupancy in a particular restaurant, they could have 30 outside and 30 inside. Can't have 60 inside plus 30. So it's really just to be ready, for the board to be ready to move quickly, rather than have the emergency end and everybody scrambling for the 60 days. As Mary Bilvon said, the one problem is that, let's say in June that the emergency ended, you don't want to be doing this in August. You really want to anticipate it and do it early, so that businesses don't have an interruption in the middle of summer. So I kind of told you all about it, but there will be a memo in your packet to review, and then there'd be no vote necessarily. It would be more, do you agree that we would proceed on that basis? I think Tracy Post had a question.
Not on what you're saying, just on upcoming agendas. I think I'm sorry. I just based on our conversation tonight, to have the wastewater advisory council come back and give us an update. Might be something we want to add.
Yeah, we should be doing that in the next couple of weeks.
You could put it probably in April, do you think?
Yep.
Okay. We might be able to do it as early as the 20th, although the 20th we have the ballot questions may not be the presentations. I don't think they're going to be that many, I guess. You'll be
We certainly
voting.
don't want to leave the month of April without getting briefed by our team on DHY and wastewater. So I think just leave that up to you folks to work out. And obviously, we're obviously highly interested in getting this back on the agenda with some recommendations.
I'll try to save space, and I'll talk with Bob Rittenauer either on the 13th or the 20th.
Okay.
Probably the 20th, but we'll talk with the committee and with Jeff.
Thank you.
I've made a note to do that, to get that on there. Done.
Thanks for bringing that up, Tracy.
Yeah.
Anybody else with an agenda item that we need to zero in on?
Chairman, I just don't see the presentation by the Golf Enterprise Committee listed. You might want to tie that down at some point.
Okay. That wasn't on my radar. I wasn't sure when they were coming in, but I'll add that, and they could even do it as part of DHY. So I'll put golf on.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Done.
Hearing no more agenda item discussion, I'm going to move on to individual items. Mike, do you have an individual item or two?
I'm all set, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. How about Eric? Do you have any?
I am going to exercise extreme restraint and not verbalize my disgust with the recent DHY developments.
Okay. How about Dan Horgan?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Tracy?
I'm good. I was going to give an update on the school committee, but it was done in public.
Okay.
They're working.
Thank you. Okay, very good. So the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, the town administrators items. Bob, is there anything that you want to speak to on this?
No, I think it's standard for the board to authorize the seasonal alcohol and entertainment. The other two items from the Housing Committee are simply changes in the agreements. We're not losing any properties. I believe one goes from a rental to a condominium, and the other is the a sale of the property of the Windriff. It simply is a change in the ownership. All of the regulations stay the same, but it needs the board's approval to
Very good.
complete the paperwork.
So do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, roll call vote. Mike Stone,
Aye.
Tracy Post,
Aye.
Eric Tolley,
Aye.
Dan Horgan.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The next item is town administrator updates. Bob, do you have any updates for us tonight?
The only thing I know you tasked me with looking at the feasibility study, and I'm almost completed with that. I do have responses both from Mr. Knappich and from Mr. Centio.
Oh, great.
I'm trying to put those together and to give you at least what I understand both of those people did in developing the bill, or the invoice, excuse me, that was sent to the town of Dennis. So I should have that done and in your packet by Friday.
Thank you.
Yeah, the only other thing that's happening is we're almost ready to sign the contract for the golf course.
Okay.
Concession. We're getting everything done on that. We have the successful bidder has met our criteria. We had a concern with the contract, but the contract is the town's contract, not their contract. So I believe the town would be protected. We have some other details, somewhat minor, to resolve, and then we can get that going. And then they would have to apply for a liquor license, et cetera.
Okay. Do we have, has there been any progress on the Bridgewater State University agreement? Is that still?
Well, yes and no. I thought that was thought it was going to be easy. It's not. It's now back to DCAM. We asked for some minor changes, what I thought, to protect the town and to change the wording. The wording in the original document protected the state very well, but it did not protect the town. So we sent it to council. Council reviewed it. They have made a series of suggested changes. That's gone back to Bridgewater, and it's now kicked upstairs, I guess, to DCAM, who controls the property, to see what they will agree to. So it's taken much longer than we had anticipated.
Okay.
But we're hopeful in the next, famous last words, 2 weeks, the thing will be resolved and we can get going on that.
Thank you. One final note on my part, Bob, is I just want to have a question for Tracy. Tracy, did you say that you were not going to be able to make the April 20th meeting?
Correct.
Okay, so when we set up DHY, Bob, we should try to avoid doing it on the 20th, because obviously Tracy should be here for that.
Okay. Yes.
All right. Do you have any other items, Bob?
No, sir.
Okay, so that leaves us with a motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Is that a second from Mr. Horgan?
It is.
Okay, roll call vote. All those in favor say aye. Mr. Stone,
Aye.
Tracy Post,
Aye.
Eric Tolley,
Aye.
Dan Horgan,
Aye.
and chair votes aye.
Enthusiastic.
Thank
Our
you.
meet-
Kyle.